Hello and welcome to this MMI tutorial where today we're going to be focusing on Brexit. And this forms part of our series of videos looking at NHS hot topics. So as I said, this forms part of a series of videos. Today we're going to be looking at Brexit, and this is for acing that medical multiple mini interview. So before we get started, why don't you ask yourself, what exactly is Brexit? Pause the video now and have a go. Okay, taking it through together then. Brexit is the process by which the UK left the European Union. Now that happened because in 2016, 52% of the population voted in favour of the UK leaving the EU. Now you might ask, what exactly is the EU? And that's a perfectly fine question to ask. So the EU is a political and economic union between countries within Europe. Not all of the countries, but the majority. And finally, what is the current situation? Well, the situation is that in 2016 we voted in favour of leaving the European Union. However, it wasn't until 2020 that we actually left. Since then, we've been in a transition period where actually the majority of the rules that applied to us before we left the EU actually still do apply. It's only in 2021 where the UK will officially sort of start making its own rules and regulations. So with regards to medicine, what are the effects of Brexit on the NHS? Think about this to yourself and pause the video now. Okay, so the first kind of area to consider is scientific research. Now obviously scientists move between countries, and actually after Brexit it might become more difficult for scientists to move between the UK and the rest of the European Union. An even bigger issue is the funding. Actually the UK is a net receiver in terms of scientific research funding, and actually we receive a net of 3.4 billion euros every year. Now, without that money, that reduces the likelihood of innovation and inventions happening within scientific research, which might slow down the process of research and access to medical treatments. The second major area is employment. Now, there are 60,000 EU nationals working within the NHS, and without them, we simply wouldn't be able to function. Now, that's even more of a problem with nursing. Remember that nurses are the backbone of the NHS. And actually, since the UK left the European Union, we've seen a reduction in the amount of nurses applying to work in the UK from overseas by 96%. That's a massive reduction, which puts patients ultimately at risk. Third, you've got the impact on the pharmaceutical company. Now, pharmaceutical companies are now very sort of multinational and actually cross a lot of country borders. Now, when the UK leaves the European Union officially and starts making its own rules, there's likely to be some frictions in terms of trade, and that can disrupt medical supply chains. There's also the issue of regulation. So the EU, as it stands, regulates a lot of the new treatments which are then offered in the NHS. Without this regulatory framework, the UK will need to provide its own rules and regulations as to how it approves medicines. Fourthly, we've got on an individual level, it might affect the access to treatment. So as it stands, UK nationals can go abroad to European Union states and access healthcare there for free using their e-HIC cards. Now it's not exactly clear what will happen post-Brexit, but actually this process might be disrupted, which may affect individuals' access to treatment. And finally, you've got the potential for extra funds. Now this kind of is very controversial in terms of the exact value, but it kind of hinges on the fact that if the UK isn't paying membership fees to the European Union, then it potentially has some more money to spend elsewhere, and that money could come into the NHS. Now, a common trap with this sort of multiple mini interview kind of setup is actually it leaves candidates too open to expressing their opinion too early, and that can actually lead to a very opinionated and polarised debate. Try and avoid giving a very strong opinion on a topic. Remember that the interviewer wants to see you consider both sides of the equation, for and against. It's perfectly fine on a human level to communicate your opinion after that, but make sure it's not overly strong and make sure it's well evaluated and reliant on evidence before you give it. Now, one of the areas in which candidates can become too opinionated is the infamous Brexit Bus. Now, this was a bus in an advertising campaign that said that actually we could save £300 million every week, and that could be invested in the NHS if we left the European Union and stopped paying their membership fees. Now, the principle of this is actually quite solid. Actually, if we leave the European Union, we will have that money spare, and actually that could be spent in terms of other things and other areas of public life. how the exact figure is quite controversial and a lot of political figures have become in hot water over their use of this figure. So let's do an MMI station together. Read the MMI station on the left, pause the video, have a think to yourself, and then answer the question as if you were in an interview setting. Try and keep on going, don't stop, and actually get to the end of your argument before advancing the video. Let's go through this together then. So remember that with these questions, you've got to give a balanced point of view and consider the pros and the cons of Brexit. And that's actually a really good way to structure this answer. So let's take the pros first. Okay, let's go through it together then. So remember that with this kind of question, you've got to give the pros and the cons. In other words, a balanced argument. And actually, this is a really good way of structuring your answer. On the pros side of things, we have 3 arguments. The first is the Brexit NHS bonus, and this is the money that we won't spend in membership fees that we could potentially invest in the NHS. The second, we've got less demand from EU nationals. Now that means that because we've got reduced migration from Europe, that means that there's potentially less demand on the NHS, which means that we can offer more quality care to UK nationals. And finally, we have to remember that migration can still occur, if not from the EU. So even though we've left the EU, it doesn't stop migration from other areas of the world. And actually a big argument in favour of Brexit is that we could adopt a points-based system of immigration where we accept skilled labour from all over the world rather than just prioritising Europe because it's Europe. On the con side of things, you've got a potential lot of shortages. So drug shortages kind of feed into that argument that we were having about the pharmaceutical companies. They're multinational companies, and actually without that frictionless trade, we might end up with shortages or trouble accessing certain drugs. Second, and arguably more important, is the staff shortages. Remember that 60,000 EU nationals work within the NHS, and actually without them, we simply can't function. So staff shortages are a major issue. And finally, we've got the issue of privatisation. Now this is quite a slippery problem. In fact, the NHS is already to some degree privatised. Private companies can compete for NHS contracts which are commissioned through CCGs. Why privatisation crops up in the Brexit debate is the argument that actually the NHS contracts could be offered in terms of trade deals, which may mean that companies in the US, for example, get unfair access to offering services in the UK. Okay, let's do another MMI station. This one focuses specifically on that staff shortages and in particular the nursing shortages in the NHS. Pause the video now, have a go at answering this question as if you were in an MMI interview, and have a go. Okay, so here are some good points to mention with this kind of question. First of all, because we're talking about nurses and the shortages of nurses, we have to consider their role. Now, a lot of people before medical school kind of think of nurses as a supportive figure, not really on the front lines, kind of sticking by the side of the patient and tending to their everyday needs. In fact, nurses do that, but you can also come across a lot of specialist nurses. So nurses that do particular procedures that doctors traditionally would have done. Likewise, nurses can be heads and leaders of the team. So actually nurses have a very diverse role within the NHS, and without them, that can lead to shortages in those services. Second, you've got potential overworking of staff. So if you want to make sure that patient care is not compromised, the existing staff left behind have to chip in and do a greater amount. And that can lead to a less favourable work-life balance, which might make it even worse to become a nurse. That may mean that we get less applications into nursing, which exacerbates that whole problem of staffing again. And finally, we've got to put this in context of the broader issues within healthcare. All across every developed country, we have increasing demand due to an ageing population. And that's not only because there's more people there, but also because these ageing populations have more complex healthcare needs. So things like dementia, which requires multidisciplinary input. Now, if we have nurse shortages, that can exacerbate that problem even more. So it's important to consider the broader themes within healthcare. Okay, I hope you enjoyed today's lesson, and we've covered these key learning points. First of all, we talked about what is Brexit and exactly the dates involved. So in 2016 when we voted for it, in 2020 when we actually left, and in 2021 when the transition period will end. Second, we talked about the effect of Brexit on the NHS. Remember those key 5 domains where it could have an impact. And third, we looked at approaching MMI debates, so answering those questions, answering interview questions, remembering to give a balanced, non-opinionated point of view.
Thanks for watching this video. Click below to subscribe and catch more of our videos. To watch our full online course and find out how you can enrol onto our award-winning programme with personalised one-to-one tutoring, online weekly webinars and more, click here.